Integrity, no action for the 4 CDH cautions. Those are SM related, not applicable.
Integrity.
So, with Integrity now flying free on its own for the remaining 32 minutes of this mission. Next up, the raise burn, a 19-second firing of Integrity's thrusters.
GPS 2.
There's a separation. Jeff Velosa, impressions.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that back in Apollo. You couldn't see something like that. So I don't know that I've ever seen a capsule pulling away like that. That was pretty dramatic. And what they're going to do now, in a couple minutes, they're going to fire their thrusters again, just to get a little bit more distance between them and the service module, and to get them in the right angle to come back through the atmosphere. But that was pretty incredible to watch.
You were telling the story about Apollo 13 at separation. Relate that story.
Yeah, so with Apollo 13, the big issue that led to the crippling of the spacecraft was an explosion in one of the oxygen tanks in the service module. But when it happened, the astronauts didn't have this view from outside the spacecraft that we have today. I think they would have loved it if they could have had those GoPro cameras, looking back at the spacecraft, telling them what had happened, what was wrong. And so they really had to wait, actually, until they were almost back to Earth, and they jettisoned that service module. And then they took photos really, really quickly so that they could get information to help assess what had gone wrong. Because at that point, they had a sense, they knew they lost a lot of oxygen, but the images they were able to capture then led to a lot of discoveries during that further investigation.
Remind us next steps. We've seen the separation. What are we expecting now, and when will we keep communication with them during this time in the next few minutes?
Yeah, so I think as they were separating too, I bet you the ground crew was looking closely, because it's the first chance to see the back of the capsule, right? So you're like, okay, did everything still look okay? You haven't been able to see the back of the capsule since it was put on top, right? So I think from a heat shield perspective, they're probably examining some of those pictures. Again, the crew capsule will now move away, and then they'll start. What we're talking about is that coming up here at 7:53, we'll start to come into the atmosphere, right? Is that about 7:53?
That's the schedule we have, yes.
Yeah, so we'll be at about 400,000 feet at that point. So from 400,000 feet down, that's the 13 minutes people talk about. So we've got a little time here where the capsule's going to get oriented, make sure it's at the right angle. The crew's going to check everything. You heard them talking about a couple small signals that they got. I think one was when they fired the thrusters. There's a couple different pressure sensors in this system. They want to agree that the pressure is the same in the system. And I think momentarily when they fired the thruster, they got different readings. So that's when they were saying, let's just ignore those readings. It's not like they typically ignore a problem, but in this case, it was a kind of a spurious reading during that maneuver. And then I think when they separated, they got a couple readings that were related to the service module that they had just pulled away from that showed up on their screens, something anomalous. And again, ground was just like, just ignore that. You've gotten rid of the service module, you're all good. So I think right now they'll do that little maneuver, then they'll be checking all the systems, make sure they're on the right angle, ready to come in.
When will Houston be able to keep, or Mission Control be constant communication? Will there be some type of blackout period?
For now, so they'll be in constant communication for now. Once they hit that 400,000 foot level or so, that's when that 6 minutes of blackout will start. And so there'll be a period there where, again, the pressure and the heat in the front of the capsule will start to create this plasma around it. And that electrically charged plasma will not allow them to communicate. Someday we hope to be able to do that. There's some ideas about how to communicate through the plasma. But for right now, that's a period where the crew can't talk to the Earth. Everything is automated at that point. And so then after that period, we'll hear them again within those last 3 or 4 minutes before touchdown, and that's when they'll be communicating back through Houston about the final descent, parachute opening, stuff like that.
Let's go to Calvin. Calvin in California, hi. Calvin in Shingle Spring.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Calvin, California. How are you? Just wanted to thank you guys for your wonderful visual on TV. I'm here with my daughter, Piper. She has a question.
How long does it take the astronauts to acclimate when they're on Earth?
Hear them again within the...
Excellent question, Piper. Piper, that's right, Calvin?
Yes, Piper.
Piper, great question. We'll let our guest take that on.
Yeah, fantastic question, Piper. So it really depends on how long the astronauts have been in space. So when they come back from the International Space Station, if they've been there for 6 months or something like that. They really have to train their bodies how to be back on Earth and to deal with gravity again. You hear these stories of astronauts who've been to the International Space Station sort of learning how to walk and then sometimes forgetting that there's gravity and falling. And so it's quite a challenge. They have to build back some of that muscle. But for a mission like this, it should not take very long for the astronauts to get used to and acclimate to being back on Earth. So it is very likely that as soon as they return, they'll, stretch their legs, they'll start moving around. We saw with earlier missions, the astronauts were able to walk immediately after their flight. So a mission that's this short, it really shouldn't take too long for them to acclimate to being back.
And the good thing is they'll have a whole medical crew all around them, right? So it's like if anybody feels in any way woozy or anything, they'll have a lot of people to help them right away.
Yeah.
We've been showing folks the USS John Murtha during the time. That's where the crew and the capsule will end up once it achieves splashdown.
But what we're talking about, Pedro, that back in Apollo, and that is part of the story, and Diesel can talk about the distance, that the crew would get on the ship, and a lot of times you'd see these interviews on the ship, and then the ship would bring them back. That is not going to be true today. They're close enough to land. Helicopters will pick them up and bring them right back to San Diego. They'll almost immediately get on jets and fly back to Houston, to Johnson Space Center. So what they want to do is get back to their medical team that can really do all the in-depth, what did you see, what did you do, all the medical checkouts, right? So they want to get them back. So it's going to be way different than what we saw back in the 60s.
What do we see in the 60s?
So in the 60s, the astronauts, they landed further out in the Pacific. So with Apollo 11, for instance, a great example. So they were about 920 miles southwest of Hawaii. And so there were 2 aircraft carriers there ready to pick them up. And a team recovered them, brought them back to the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier then went to Pearl Harbor, so it took about 2 days to get to Pearl Harbor, and then there they met an airplane, which then flew them directly back to Houston. But for that mission, I will say the astronauts were in quarantine, so a slightly different protocol was necessary, and so they had to do the whole trip inside of an Airstream trailer.
And viewers, we just want to let you know that we're just showing you video of the separation that took place just moments ago, and we'll watch that, and as other things are lining up to happen before splashdown just after 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 8:07, I believe it is exactly, with our guest. Let's go to Richard. Richard in North Carolina. Hi there.
Hey, this is Richard from North Carolina. I just wanted to say I'm proud to see us pushing forward with Optimus. It's not just about the moon, it's about inspiring the next generation and proving we can still do big things. My wife Emily's been watching just about every moment of this, and I hope we stay committed to it. I'm so proud of them, and thank you guys for hosting all this.
Richard in North Carolina, Tizumio Harmony. I read a quote of yours saying that there was perception at Apollo times, once it was done, that the space program stopped, but that wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case, and also during the shuttle program, when that ended, sometimes people thought it stopped. What NASA is doing is incredible. Human spaceflight's just a little part of it, and throughout time, there have been all these other really important programs in astrophysics and heliophysics, planetary science. You can go on and on and on. And it's so exciting to see the attention that Artemis program is getting. Like your wife, it was really hard for me to do anything else this week besides just follow that coverage constantly. It was so much fun to see every single moment of this mission so far. And I think it has drawn a lot of attention and enthusiasm for space exploration. And I hope that people pay more and more attention to what NASA's doing.
As an Apollo historian, was it bittersweet to see records being broken by this crew and say, and be honest, yes, okay.
Apollo still has many records that are not broken. I could go on and on. And well, here's one that I don't think no one's ever going to break this, which is the first lunar landing, half the world stopped what they were doing to watch that landing in unison. You can think of that, half the world, 1 to 2 people were doing something together. That is absolutely extraordinary. If anyone knows of any example or anything that rivals that, but I don't think so. The numbers now, the population's greater. We do have, lots of people tuning in to all sorts of things, but half the world doing something together. It's really quite remarkable, and Apollo might be the only.
But in a way, and Richard, that was really eloquent, and I think it's bringing out the most eloquent in all of us in trying to kind of put into words how we feel about all of this. So whether it was back in Apollo days or today, that's what's really cool about this, is that there's so many things in the world that are more challenging, you watch this and you're so inspired. We're all so inspired by these 4 people and what they're doing, and that team behind them that came together to do this. Yeah, it's like we're all trying to come up with the right words, and it's just, yeah, it's pretty inspirational.
Tim joins us from Oregon. Tim, hello, you're on with our guest.
Yes, hi. I was wondering about Mike Collins and the Apollo program. Didn't they go far on the far side of the moon?
Go for it.
Yeah, so it's great you brought up Mike Collins. So he was the command module pilot, and you're very correct that he orbited around the far side of the moon. There's been a lot of talk in this mission that these astronauts are seeing the far side of the moon, and they're seeing features of the far side that have never been seen before. And the reason for that is because some of the areas they've seen were in shadow during the Apollo mission. So all the Apollo missions were timed particularly so that the sun was at a particular angle, which meant that parts of the far side were not illuminated. And so they didn't see some of these features. With Artemis 2, they're also seeing the moon at a greater distance than most of the Apollo missions. So for all the Apollo orbital missions, they were orbiting about 60 miles around the moon, 60 miles from the moon. But this mission was much, much greater. So, right, that's like about 50,000? No, 5,000 miles. Sorry, yeah. 5,000 miles. So at a much greater distance, right? So, and that also allows them to see the far side of the moon in a different perspective. So a number of factors are contributing to why people are saying that with this mission, they're seeing the far side in a new and different way. And you're very right that Mike Collins orbited around, saw the far side by himself as his crewmates Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were walking on the lunar surface.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that what the difference is going to be this time is that when you see people go back to the moon and land, all of the crew will leave the capsule, get in the lander, and go to the surface. So now with automation, you can leave the capsule in orbit. Poor Mike Collins doesn't have to be up there by himself watching his teammates go down to the surface. Everyone can go down. They'll get back to the capsule when they're done. So we are going to now be able to get those 4 people, hopefully, or more down to the surface on future missions.
And speaking of perspective shots, look like we're getting a shot from the inside out of the capsule. Jeff Velosin, any impressions there as far as what we're seeing?
I think, so I was just looking, I think some of those, so the screen on the left, I think might be some footage from during the mission. The
Yes.
screen on the right, I don't know, is that the current view? That is the Earth getting bigger down below.
Looking out, yeah.
So, yeah. So, again, I think what's amazing is I got here a couple hours before we went on air, and I was sitting in the green room watching, and the Earth was this little ball, right? That was a couple hours ago. Now they're about ready to get to the fringe of the atmosphere. You can kind of tell that they're in that upper fringe of the atmosphere at that point. So it's amazing how fast they're traveling.
Heck of a car window that they're looking out of right now, the Orion.
In a little bit, what they're going to be is seeing plasma around those windows, right? They're going to see orange and red flame. And so that's going to be slightly disconcerting. They've trained for that. But yeah, that beautiful view out the window will look like fire in a minute.
The Orion entry interface 753, remind us of what that is.
Yeah, so that's when they get to that 400,000 foot level-ish. And that's when they start that entry profile. That's when the heating starts on the outside of the capsule. And that's within a minute or 2 of that is when the blackout's going to start, the 6-minute blackout.
Oh, and the concerns at that point when it comes to safety of the crew.
Yeah. Well, this is where that heat shield has got to do its job, right? This is what everyone's worried about. That is the first couple minutes of the entry where they're at the steepest angle. They get to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside of that shell at the bottom. And the capsule has to be pointed in the right direction, and the heat shield has to hold up. And so that's the most critical period of this whole flight.
And I imagine that at this point, Apollo saw a lot of these kind of situations happen, as well as getting things ready for re-entry.
Yes, so there's a lot of attention paid to these last few minutes, especially in the Apollo 13 mission. There was a lot of concern about the potential damage to the heat shield from the explosion. And so this was a very nerve-wracking moment for everyone back in 1970, April 1970. And their blackout was longer, actually, because of the trajectory of that spacecraft, which you can imagine if you were waiting on Earth to hear them communicate again, that it was taking longer really was quite nerve-wracking. But yes, this is very similar to those moments. So much about the re-entry from the moon is very similar between Apollo and Artemis.
Sydney joins us in New Hampshire. Hi, Sydney. Go ahead. You're on.
Hello. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. My question is very similar to Tim's, just about what you meant by the first time you can see the dark side of the moon with the naked eye, because I also thought that Apollo 13 went behind as well. So I guess similar question. So just wanted to say thank you guys for doing this, and huge congratulations to everyone involved in making this happen. You guys as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the big differences between this mission and Apollo, the Apollo astronauts we talked about wanted to land in the daylight on the side of the moon facing the Earth so they could communicate back to the Earth. And so the other side of the moon was more in darkness. No,
Sorry.
it was partially lit.
No, yeah. So with
Okay.
Apollo, they wanted the correct angle of the sun.
so
So
not
they actually no, it was a quarter moon. So if you can imagine it, just when you look at it from Earth, it looks like half the moon is illuminated. And so what that meant is half the other side was illuminated, and then half the Earth side. So it was a quarter moon. And what that did is it really helped add contrast and help them see the features. So when they were landing, they were really clear about where the craters were, where the rocks were, the shadows were at the correct angle. And they actually did a lot of research on the angles of the sun and what would be ideal for landing. But that meant that every Apollo mission, that was a similar phase of the moon, which meant that a similar area of the moon was illuminated by the sun. And so with these missions, you get a different part of the moon illuminated. And so that's one of the really big differences between the perspective of these astronauts. They're also mentioned that they're able to see the lunar South Pole, the polar regions, more clearly than the Apollo astronauts. And a large part is because the Apollo missions orbited very, very close to the moon. And so if you can imagine orbiting around the moon, you're going to see the central area of the moon up close, but the polar regions, you're not going to get as much of a perspective at. So I imagine that was different for Apollo 13. That's the one mission where you have the flyby and it's at a great distance. But all those other Apollo missions, they orbited close up to the moon and just would have had a different perspective and a different illumination.
We're coming up.
Mission.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're coming up on that entry interface. Let's listen to a little bit of the communication that's going on.
All of the activities today have gone off in perfect fashion. No issues with the vehicle, no issues with the crew. And the weather at the splashdown site is go. Coming up on 1 minute until entry interface. Mark 1 minute until entry interface. 1 minute, 20 seconds until the expected start of our 6-minute blackout.
Integrity, 1 minute to a 6-minute blackout.
Integrity.
Ten seconds till entry interface. And we have crossed the threshold, now entering the Earth's atmosphere. We're at 400,000 feet, traveling 34,800 feet per second. Time to splash down 13 minutes, 10 seconds. As predicted, we've entered our communications blackout. This will be a 6-minute blackout period. No voice, no data from the crew. We're 30 seconds.
And there we go. As far as we've experienced blackouts before, as part of this mission, here we go into another one. Jeff Velosin, it looked like it was interesting how the whole perspective of the Earth changed depending on how the capsule was changing.
Yeah, they're getting that aligned for that final descent into the atmosphere. You can start to see some wisps of that plasma starting to build up right before the cutout. And you can start to see that they're entering that top of the atmosphere. It's amazing to think that 13 minutes later they're going to be down safely on the ocean. Yeah.
So walk us through again. I hate to be repetitive, but from now until splashdown, what are we looking for?
So the blackout started, they're at the steepest descent angle right now. They built up this plasma, they're at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the dramatic descent. After about a minute or two, that's when they're gonna do the skip, where they're gonna slowly make the capsule kind of rise up a little bit, slow down a little bit, and then they're gonna come back down and finish the re-entry. So I think, after the 6 minutes is up, we'll get communication back. At that point, they'll start to go subsonic, right? So they'll go down below the speed of sound, and at that point, they can start to open up parachutes, but they're still going like, 300-400 miles an hour. So it's gonna be a slow process. So you'll start to see 2 small parachutes come out. Those are gonna stabilize the capsule and get it ready to deploy its big chutes. Then you'll see some other small parachutes come out. Those are gonna pull the big chutes out. Then the big chutes are gonna open a little bit, then they're gonna open up a little bit more, and they're gonna open up a little bit more. Because again, until you get going slower, you can't put that big parachute out, it'll just rip itself apart. And so it's gonna be a long process of deploying bigger and bigger parachutes and opening them more and more during that last subsonic period. And that's just the last few minutes, from 20,000 feet or so down to the ground.
The shoots of today versus the shoots of the Apollo era, how would they be different?
Very, very similar, actually. And so they use this ring sail technology, which in the main parachutes, there are little holes in them, which allows some airflow through them. It helps them to stabilize. Early parachute development, they had this issue called squidding, where you can sort of imagine what that looked like. So the parachutes wouldn't unfurl completely, and they'd look like squids. And so what they really, through a lot of testing, they figured out that adding little holes basically to the parachute areas for the air to escape through actually increase the stability of these parachutes. But it was a very similar system. The Apollo system had a few fewer chutes, but the difference only it comes down to getting rid of the shield initially. So I think Artemis uses a handful of them, Apollo used 1, but other than that, it's the same system where you have those initial drogue chutes, and then you have the pilot chutes, and then you have those main chutes as well.
The blackout periods during Apollo, were they similar type of time, more time, less time? How did that differ?
Similar type of time, and it's also a point where the astronauts are experiencing the most intense G-forces. So once they get closer to the Earth, the landing, it'll be more like 20 miles per hour that they hit the ocean, which is relatively slow. That's not where they're really going to be experiencing the most intense force. So it's during this phase that they are. In Artemis, it should be 3.9 Gs. Apollo was greater. It was closer, between 6 and 7 Gs, depending on the mission.
What was the difference between the Gs? Is it because of the capsule itself, or were there other factors there?
I think it was the speed and the weight. I think those contributed. But it wasn't a huge difference. It was relatively similar.
Again, the John Murtha there is what we're seeing on screen as we wait for this period to go through. We'll look at it and for a bit.
Yeah, and they hope to be, they're about 4 or 5 miles away from where they think the capsule's going to land. And the goal is they want to...
We're still in the blackout period. Still do not have communications from the crew. We're standing by for communications from the crew. We should be out of the blackout period less than a minute from now. We are now processing data from integrity.
On the dance floor.
Landing and support officer reports the small boats are en route to the splashdown target zone.
Solid hunt.
Passing through 150,000 feet, our trajectory is perfect. We're getting intermittent views of integrity. Still waiting to establish voice communication.
Integrity, Houston, comm check, post blackout.
Houston, Integrity, we have you loud and clear.
Your trajectory is nominal and your recovery teams have visual.
Guys, looks good.
No action for the enabled internal camera controller fail.
Big cheers from the viewing room here in Mission Control as voice communication reestablished with Commander Reed Wiseman. For America in a waiting world, integrity is 5.5 minutes away from coming home. Passing 100,000 feet now. Range to splashdown 19 nautical miles.
Integrity impact to the camera controller fail is no cab 1 views of the chutes.
Integrity.
We're processing good data through the GPS system. A good view of integrity, time to splashdown 4.5 minutes. And a view of integrity from the WB-57. We're at 50,000 feet.
Never up, never in.
The pyros are on for forward bay cover jettison. And there go the first series of parachutes, and we're on drogues.
And Houston, we're visual 2 drones out the window.
2 good drogue shoots. Next up,
We copy, we see them.
Next up, the deployment of pilot parachutes that will pull the main chutes out. Time to splash down 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Perfect perfect descent rate according to flight dynamics.
Speed rates on 2 drogues.
We keep the same on board.
Passing through 10,000 feet, still on drogues. Main chute deploy. We're at 5,000 feet. Search and recovery beacon has been activated on integrity. And we have 3 good main chutes. Good 3 main chutes, good reefing, good descent rate.
Rates, and we see 3 good-looking parachutes. Integrity, cabin pressure indicates no need for hydrazine checks.
Integrity copies.
This is a perfect descent for integrity. Its crew sounding hale and hearty on board. Time to splash down 1 minute, 15 seconds. Integrity about to complete a journey spanning 694,481 miles from its launch from the Kennedy Space Center back on April 1st, and a trip around the moon. Passing through 1,000 feet.
Integrity, splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth. And the landing and support officer reports the vehicle is stable 1. We still will be deploying the crew module uprighting system to maintain that orientation. A perfect bullseye splashdown for Integrity and its 4 astronauts.
You fucking guys. Can't, not on, I'm stuck on the others. I'm stuck on YouTube. Rick. I'm stuck on a YouTube and Twitch thing. It's not my chat. It won't let me switch back over. Here's my scorecard. Birdie, eagle, bogey. Yeah, I'll fuck it up though. I'll fuck it up. See? Ah! Okay. Is he on? All right, Kels. Get in there, you son of a... Dang it. Told you I'd fuck it up. We're gonna fuck it up big time. Sit, Jesus Christ. God damn it. Unbelievable. 4. Son of a bitch. A 9. Told you I'd fuck it up. Oh, you bastard.